this is Spook with Emma. I'm Emma and today is a fun one. Recently I was reminded of Point Horror Books, and it's a series of books aimed at teenagers or older children in the 90s, and I was obsessed with them at the time. I didn't have them all, but I was a big fan. One of my sisters was. We had some friends who were, so it really didn't matter that you couldn't afford them all because they came out, I think, every couple of weeks. At least once a month they brought a new one out, and someone would get it and then we would all get to read them. I didn't keep them, I don't know why, but I don't have them anymore. But when I was reminded of them, I decided to re-buy them. So I bought a couple and I thought I would see if they are still scary. So I first got The Waitress by Sinclair Smith, and then I've got My Secret Admirer by Carol Ellis. So these are both books that I've read before, but not for a lot of years. I don't remember if I found them scary. I think I probably did. I don't remember being scared to sleep when I was reading these books. I think they were more thrillers than really horrors. So the first one that I reread was The Waitress by Sinclair Smith, and it's about Paula. She's 17, I think, 16 or 17. She is in a new town and she gets a job as a waitress at a restaurant called The Doghouse. And almost as soon as she starts working there, some strange kind of pranks start happening. I don't want to spoil it too much, but there's something with a dead rat. There's lots of notes being left that say mildly threatening things like, "You're not a good waitress, Paula. Maybe you'll have to pay for it." Things like this that are kind of mildly menacing, and she doesn't know who's doing it. She is also being targeted by a girl at the school who is the niece of the owner of the restaurant, who's playing nasty pranks on her as well at school. But Paula doesn't know who's doing the pranks at the restaurant, and if it's the same girl or if it's someone else. She doesn't really trust anyone. And there's also an added complication, which is that somebody was killed, poisoned, at a different restaurant in the same town, but some of the people who are in Paula's circle are connected to that restaurant, so it's possible that one of them killed that person and is now after Paula. There are lots of parts where she thinks she's being followed. She feels like someone's following her, and she feels quite in danger. Her car breaks down on the road is called Lonesome Lane. She breaks down there because someone's tampered with her car. So there's a lot of kind of menacing things happen to her. And then at the end, obviously, she finds out who's been doing it. I won't spoil who it is or what happens at the end. And then I read My Secret Admirer, and this is about Jenny. She's also new in town, and it's the summer holidays, and she meets some of the students she'll be going to school with, and they go on a scavenger hunt. And one of the things they have to find is a bird's nest. So they live in I'm not sure exactly where they live, but it's in quite a mountainous place. So some of them go up the rocks looking for bird's nests, and then there is an accident that happens to somebody that Jenny might be a witness to. And then after that, everybody starts acting weird with her, except one person, her secret admirer, who starts leaving voicemails for her, telling her that he's her admirer. And she feels like she can talk to the secret admirer and trust them. Unclear why. Even on the front of the book, it says, "He was crazy about Jenny, crazy enough to kill her." I mean, obviously, she doesn't have that clue, but I don't know why she suspects everyone except the secret admirer. Anyway, she does. And that's another one where lots of people are doing suspicious things, and there are some weird pranks, like a dead snake is left at her house and various other things. So she's kind of in fear for her life through a lot of the book. So similar in some ways, both new in town, which works quite well because it means that everybody is a suspect because they don't know anyone enough to trust them. And so that means anyone could be the killer, which I think worked quite well. I can't say I felt scared reading either of these. I did ask some 8 to 11-year-olds to read them, tell me what they thought. None of them said they were mid, which is quite a good accolade if it's not mid. one of them found the notes in the Waitress a bit scary because, interestingly, she said she wasn't worried about the main character because the main character always survives, but because there were these menacing notes, she didn't like reading them because she felt like something bad was going to happen to somebody. One of them said she found it tense. There were some tense moments. They definitely kept their attention. In fact, they read them very quickly, either in one sitting or sometimes one night and then the next morning. So I guess if they were doing a front cover endorsement, they might say, I devoured this in one sitting, like everyone says. I hate it when I see that. On the front of every single book, someone says it. So please either be original or just say, I read it in one sitting. I enjoyed them. They were quite fast paced. I wouldn't say they were scary, but they did keep me interested. There was also for me a lot of kind of nostalgia, not because I had the same experience of like being 16 or 17, being a waitress, driving around, having these boyfriends who don't really have a personality, but they're very strong and helpful logistically. They carry things or take places. That wasn't my experience of being a teenager, but I think when I was younger, like coming up to being a teenager, that's how I expected it was going to be. And so it was nostalgic in that sense. One other weird similarity between them, they both reference Daphne du Maurier books. I'm not sure why. In The Waitress, their English teacher is talking about the birds, the film, but also the short story it's based on. And then in My Secret Admirer, Jenny is reading Rebecca. I don't know why they're referencing Daphne du Maurier. I don't know if that's in all the point horror books. It's kind of a weird thing. It actually would be interesting to know because these are different authors. The style is quite different. I would say The Waitress is more fun and kind of campy, and My Secret Admirer is a bit more serious. It also has a bit more of things like so Jenny's 17, and her parents are away, so she has to have a quote from some painters about the house, and they come to the house, and one of them, she says, is 30, and he keeps staring at her because she's in her dressing gown, and he keeps like staring and is quite creepy, not as a suspect, just creepy and like how men are sometimes with teenagers. The Waitress was the more fun, light-hearted one, apart from people chasing you and trying to kill you. Obviously, that's not light-hearted, but even that's done probably in a slightly more light-hearted way. But even though they have different styles, they do have a lot of similarities. I seem to remember that my favourite of the point horror authors was Diane Ho. I need to check that. I need to read some of hers and see if they're different. I know R.L. Stine, who is famous for Goosebumps, he was another point horror author. So I'll read more actually because I'm intrigued now also to see how similar they all are, because I think the authors who wrote point horror must have been given some kind of framework to work with to keep some kind of continuity. So it would be interesting to see how similar and how different they are between them. Thinking back, what I was reading before point horror was probably Horrible Histories, Famous Five, and those kind of Enid Blyton books, the Narnia books. And then I read all of the point horrors, and that was kind of all I wanted to read for a while. And then I think after that I moved on to Mary Higgins Clark, which actually seems like quite a reasonable next step from the point horrors as well. I think they follow a similar, obviously they're not so much aimed at children and teenagers, but they have a somewhat similar formula. So I will read more. I'm intrigued. And I didn't remember, of these two, I definitely read them before, but I didn't remember what happened. I didn't remember who the killers was. What I kind of like about them in a way is that they set up all the suspects, and any of them could be the killer, but you don't know who to trust, you don't know who is the killer, and then the killer is one of the people that you suspected. I prefer that to sometimes with thrillers, especially over the last few years, you'll get thrillers where the tagline says, danger is closer to home than you think, or something. And then you think, well, it's the husband. It's exactly the danger is exactly where I think it is. It's coming from the husband, because it usually is. And then the woman will never ever suspect the husband and will suspect everyone else, but you know it's always going to end up being the husband that no one ever suspects. And I think twists are just hard to pull off, because if you're expecting them, then they lose a lot of their impact. And then people do these weird twists where they set it up and everyone's a suspect, and then the killer ends up being someone who was in one scene at the very beginning and then hasn't been in it since, and you're like, well, no, of course I didn't suspect him, because he was just in a queue at the post office in the first scene and he hasn't actually been in it, so that's not really a good twist either. So these are more kind of standard, traditional, setting up different suspects, and then they all have a reasonable excuse for their weird behaviour, except for one who's a killer. So I have no complaints with that. I quite like that. I think it works well. So I will read more. I did enjoy these, and it's kind of interesting to see where my reading tastes have come from and how they've developed. Let me know if you've read them. They were so popular in the 90s, and I don't know why they stopped doing them. I think they did move on to Goosebumps, but I feel like Goosebumps were for younger children. And then I don't know what happened to Point Horror. They did do, I think, Point Crime. I might have read a couple. Point Romance I didn't read, wasn't really interested. And actually the Point Horrors always have a romance element. Anyway, it seems like these two definitely do. Let me know if you did read them in the 90s, because they were massive. And let me know if you have a favourite. I think that my favourite was Funhouse, and I'm going to try and get that one. I had to look, it's like £20 secondhand, and I don't know why, but I might get it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.